Hey, welcome in.
Welcome to the Arrowhead Addict podcast.
We are here coming to you live.
The Kansas City Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl. You only win a Super Bowl 2 times every 5 years, right? Oh! The warm-up act is over. Let's bring in Melissa Etheridge, massive Chiefs fan. Melissa,
Super Bowl champion, 2-time Pro Bowler, and Trent Green. Trent Green, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
And he picked it up! He picked it up! He's gonna score!
and we'll see you next week. But until then, as always, go Chiefs. Welcome into the Arrowhead Addict podcast. It is Thursday. What the hell is the date? I never say the date on the show. It's Thursday, March 28th. We're almost to April, and you're here with the Arrowhead Addict podcast. Patrick Allen here with you, as always, joined by the blog father, Arrowhead Addict co-founder, and my pal, Adam Best. Been a while since I've had you on, man. It's good to cross the streams with our shows a little bit.
I love it. We got to do this more often.
Yeah, man, it's a lot of fun. We always have good conversations. We've got a lot to get to today. Chiefs making a little bit of news. I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation. And at the end, for Patty's Power Rankings, just decided this on the fly. We're going to rank our top 3 Tom Hanks movies. I always like to talk movies when Adam's on because we're both big movie guys. So I think that'll be fun. So start thinking about your top 3 Tom Hanks movies. We'll go through those at the end of the show. My camera's causing a little bit of...
I got it. I'm going to have to multitask. Tom Hanks.
Yeah. Sorry, just some technical difficulties. Oh, I made it worse.
Why is Dragnet the first movie that came to mind? Oh, after Forrest Gump. I thought Forrest Gump and Dragnet. Yeah.
He was in Dragnet? They did a Dragnet?
They did. Him and Dan Aykroyd. I don't know. It was just a movie that was on a lot when I was 8 years old. So...
I used to watch the TV show on Nick at Night. I think it was on Nick at Night, the reruns. But I did not know that. What year did that come out?
It came out in the 80s, mid 80s. Okay. I think it might be Christopher Plummer plays this secret pagan worshiping guy who's an upstanding citizen, but that's his real vibe. So gonna have to check it out.
Yeah, I will have to check it out. Yeah. So listen, it's this is a weird time of year, right? Because the first wave and kind of the second wave of free agency is over, and we're still not quite a month, but almost a month out from the NFL draft. So this is that weird time of year where teams are catching their breath, getting the lay of the land. Okay, here's what we got done in this first wave of free agency. Here's where our cap space situation is at. And maybe they're having some preliminary discussions with other teams. Obviously, Sneed got traded. We'll talk a little bit about that. But they're kind of all right, no one's in a rush to do anything right now. Would you agree with that? They can kind of wait and see if a deal materializes that they're trying to get done. Great. But if they had a major panic button priority, they probably already dealt with that. Or at this point, they kind of want to see what they get in the draft. Would you agree with that?
Nobody's in a hurry. A lot of the available free agents are veterans who kind of just want to kick back and wait, see if a good deal arises. Some of them don't want to go to training camp, presumably. And then for the NFL, you think for us fans, hey, they've got a break in between the Super Bowl and free agency. No, the Super Bowl slingshots them right into the combine. And that's really, all this tampering stuff. They're tampering like crazy. They're in Indianapolis, going out for, what's the place? The steakhouse, Emos or whatever. Is
there one called St. Elmo's? There's a couple.
St. Elmo's. It's not Emos. Emos is in Stillwater or something, Oklahoma City or something.
Yeah. And then there's a place called Prime as well. So that's where a lot of these big discussions happen. And some of the deals get done. Some of it's table setting. And now they're really hunkering down. And I'm sure behind the scenes, there's just a lot of rumors going around, right? Teams are trying to get a feel for the draft boards of other teams and what they might be doing. And this is what they call the silly season, which is where in a few days here, you're going to see more and more reports start coming out from the NFL insiders like Schefter, Ian Rappaport, and they're going to be like, so-and-so seems to be interested in this. It really happens with the quarterbacks, right? Like they'll start, if there's a good quarterback, they'll start teams will leak negative things about them, hoping that they'll slide. I mean, all kinds of crazy shit happens. You can't trust anything that you hear this time of year.
Yeah, that happened to CJ Stroud last year with the S2 cognition test that has kind of fallen out of favor because it was so down on him. And it seems like he didn't take it very seriously was one of the issues. And I think some of the context was missing there when it was reported. And, context isn't really something people care about during draft season. Everyone just gets swept up in the mania. Every year we have a quarterback that just really, in my opinion, has no business zooming up the boards. I'm kind of feeling JJ McCarthy is this year's candidate for that.
Yeah, he really is. I mean, people talking about him potentially going second overall. Look, I'm biased. I don't like the guy because I'm an Ohio State fan, but I don't see it. I don't see him working out at the NFL level, at least not going second overall. That just seems crazy. But there's
Zach Wilsoning, right? It's Zach Wilsoning all over again.
Right. There's always some guy and it's usually, I'm not trying to get all weird here, but like it's usually a white quarterback that goes like shooting up boards right before the draft. I don't know why. You saw it with like Mitchell Trubisky. It's weird and it usually doesn't work out. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with
Daniel
JJ.
Jones, I think, was another one that shot into the top 6 or so.
Yeah. And sometimes these teams, they just get like enamored with like one thing and they think they found the diamond in the rough. It's like all the analysis that everybody's been doing for the last couple of years on these quarterbacks is like pretty well set. Like we've got a good idea of who these guys are. And then like, they'll be like, that arms, sometimes it works out. Like I think Josh Allen was like great in college. He wasn't a very accurate quarterback.
Couldn't hit the side of a barn, man.
Right. Yeah. And usually when guys come to the NFL, they do not become more accurate. They get less. Their completion percentage goes down. Josh Allen was a very rare case where he improved and it took him some time. He was not very good his first year, but that's what I think happens is they see some sort of attribute, whether it's, play calling, arm strength, and they're like, this guy, we can fix him. Like we can make him. And it just usually doesn't work out. You don't get too many like situations where, like Patrick Mahomes wasn't a guy that he was like getting second round grades from people. He's raw, air raid. And I don't think many people, with the exception of maybe some insiders, when the Chiefs traded up in that draft, thought that they weren't taking Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, and it turns out the real situation was they had to leapfrog Sean Payton or they weren't going to get him.
Yeah.
The sort of under-discussed element of this is how much owners weigh in. If your owner wants a quarterback, if he's sick of waiting for a quarterback and gets enamored with one of these guys, as a coach or GM, you have a gun to your head. What are you going to do? So I think that happens more often than you'd probably expect. I mean, who knows what happened in Carolina last year and how much David Tepper weighed in on the Bryce Young discussion.
Yeah. And look, man, I mean, people made a huge mistake. And I, as an Ohio State guy, was very high on CJ Stroud. I always thought CJ Stroud was going to be a better NFL quarterback than Justin Fields. Just having watched them, I just didn't think Justin Fields dealt well with pressure in college. And I didn't see that getting any better in the NFL when he didn't have some sort of all-star team out there and an all-star offensive line protecting him. He's obviously talented. I think he belongs in the NFL, but CJ Stroud just was cool as a cucumber, man. He stand back there. He played big in big games in the national, playing Georgia in the playoff. Like they could have won that game if their kicker made a kick at the end. So, I mean, he was people tried to knock him saying he couldn't do more than one read. I mean, all that's out the window. And the intelligence test, man, get out of here with that crap. Like, I just think you don't have to be like a Mensa, like scholar to be a brilliant sports mind. And I'm not saying these guys that CJ Stroud's not smart. I'm just saying that, like, okay, so he didn't do well on some test where you're asking him like logic and math problems. Some people just don't do well at tests, period, but they're very smart. When you're out there on the NFL field or you're playing a sport, it's almost like lizard brain at a certain point. Like, it just kicks in. Like, how smart is LeBron James? I'm not sure. But what I can tell you is that everybody who talks to him that's around him on the basketball court is like, this guy's a basketball genius. He remembers and recalls plays. You can just tell him like a moment in a game and he'll tell you exactly what happened. Like, that's incredible. CJ Stroud has like, just trust what you see on the football field. And some of this other stuff, like maybe it tells you a little bit about him, but could you imagine like disqualifying some of these incredible athletes because of the Wonderlic?
Well, not the Wonderlic, but I will say that the S2 cognition test, it was so bad it scared me a little bit. But the reporting under it wasn't giving us the full context. I agree with you though. I would have taken him over Bryce Young, and one of the reasons why I like him better than Justin Fields, and one of the reasons people should have been more invested in Patrick Mahomes, one of the stickiest things from college to the pros is pressure to sack rate. How well do these quarterbacks evade pressure and prevent their team from eating a sack, which is the ultimate drive killer, right? Even more than turnovers. I mean, turnovers happen, but you just can't eat sacks at the rate that some of these guys eat sacks. So I think that's an underrated part of the discussion. But also Anthony Richardson. Both of those guys, I think CJ Stroud's probably going to be the better player, but Anthony Richardson looks like Cam Newton out there. Yeah. So I just don't understand the Bryce Young of it all, I guess. But I'm glad the Chiefs share a league with so many of these inept front offices.
Well, and look, it's hard to get right. I mean, it took the Chiefs like almost a century.
They didn't even try for
right.
what, 30 since Todd Blackledge in 83?
Yeah. And so it's the most important position. It's the hardest one for these people to get right. We'll see how it goes this year. It's going to be fantastic. By the way, you're watching the Arrowhead Addict podcast. If you're out there on YouTube watching live right now, do me a favor and hit that like button. Fire off in the comments. We want to hear from you. We want to hear what your opinions are on this stuff. We want to hear about what your top 3 Tom Hanks movies are. We're going to do those at the end of the show, but we've got a lot to get to. So I want to dive into that. But before we do, I just got to let you know that if you haven't downloaded the FanDuel app yet, you're definitely going to want to take advantage of this offer. New users who sign up through our link must deposit $10 and then place a first wager on $5 on a live bet. If that first bet wins, you will receive $200 in bonus bets straight to your account. This offer is only available if you sign up through our link, bit.ly/arrow200. You can find the link in the description below our stream, or as well, you can scan the QR code on the screen to start signing up. Again, that is bit.ly/ARROW200. Offers only available to new customers who are 21 and older and physically present. You got to be there in a legal gambling state. Please remember to always gamble responsibly. Check out the episode description for the link and the full terms of the offer. Not only that, you get a cool deal. You're really supporting the show. You help us keep the lights on. Big basketball games being played tonight, so you might want to check that out. There's all kinds of fun opportunities to take advantage of that. We appreciate you. Okay. So let's talk about, 2 things I want to talk about. One is this new kickoff rule. Okay. And the other is this new player the Chiefs signed. And I think that they are kind of related, right? So if you haven't been reading a bunch of this stuff this week, the new kickoff rule the NFL approved at the owners' meetings, it basically works like this. Kickoffs will start at the kicking team's 35-yard line. And then the 10 other players from the kicking team will line up on the opposite team's 40-yard line instead of running the length of the field when the ball is kicked. And then, so like the kicking team and the defending team line up like 10 yards away from each other. That's right. It's 10 yards, I think.
I think so.
And it's then there's like a kickoff zone in the back, and there's all this weird stuff. But basically what it does is it encourages kickoffs because, and I'm trying to pull up the rule here. Yeah, here it is. I'm going to get a better description for you than me rambling on. So all kicking team players, other than the kicker, will line up at the receiving team's 40-yard line. The kicker cannot cross the 50-yard line until the ball touches the ground or a player in the landing zone or end zone. The 10 kicking team players cannot move until the ball hits the ground or a player in the landing zone or end zone. So again, the ball is kicked from the 35-yard line, same as right now. If it's a safety, they'll kick from the 20-yard line, same as current rule, okay? So the receiving team lines up like this, that the setup zone is a 5-yard area from the 35 to the 30-yard line, where at least 9 receiving team players must line up. At least 7 players with a foot on the 35-yard line, restraining line, with alignment requirements, outside numbers to hashes, and inside hashes. This is super complicated sounding.
So basically, 2 guys can be back returning, and then out of the 9 blockers, 7 of them have to be on a line, but 2 of those guys can be back a little bit, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah. So players not on the restraining line must be lined up in the setup zone outside the hash marks. So back like this. All players in the setup zone cannot move until the kick has hit the ground or the player in the landing zone or the end zone. And then a maximum of 2 returners may line up in the landing zone and can move at any time prior to or during the kick. The landing zone is the area between the receiving team's goal line and its 20-yard line. Any kick that hits short, so this is how it encourages returns. Any kick that hits short of the landing zone is treated like a kickoff out of bounds. So the ball gets spotted at the 40. So like you can't do like an onside kick. You can't kick the ball like 25 yards. And if it hits the ground, it's like you kicked it out of bounds. So they get the ball at the 40. The play would be blown dead as soon as the kick lands short of the landing zone. So again, the landing zone is the 20 to the goal line. So you've got to land the ball in there so the guy has a chance to return it. Any kick that hits the landing zone must be returned. Any kick that hits the landing zone and then goes into the end zone must be returned or downed by the receiving team. If it's downed, then it's a touchback at the 20-yard line, like back in the day. Kicks that hit the end zone and stay in bounds, returned or down. If downed, then touchback to the 30-yard line. So if they kick it, and it has to land in the landing zone. If it lands in the landing zone, you're going to end up at the 20. But if they kick it into the end zone and it gets down there, it moves the ball out to the 30. So it's advantageous for the returner if they get it in the landing zone. Why would you down the ball? You're between the 10 and the 20. Why would you down the ball just to get it to the 20? But if it's in the end zone, well, now you're getting a guaranteed start at the 30-yard line. So it enforces the kicking team to kick it short of the end zone. And if they try to kick it into the end zone, the returner can down it and move the ball to the 30. Any kick that goes out the back of the end zone in the air or bounces is a touchback to the 30-yard line. So the kicking team has to decide, are we good with our opponents starting at the 30-yard line, or do we want to try to kick it short and force a return and try to tackle them short of the 30-yard line? But if we kick it short and we kick it too short, it could end up being at the 40-yard line. It sounds all crazy and complicated, but it's actually pretty simple in practice. You can't fair catch. If you do, the officials will blow the play dead. And there's a whole thing about onside kicks now can only happen in the 4th quarter if a team declares it. And it would be the current onside kick rules. So that's a lot. But basically what it does is it slows down collisions by, one, putting the kickoff team and the return team really close to each other. And 2, they can't start running until the ball is kicked. So they can't get up. So it's sort of almost like a running play, right? Like it's like a blocked running play with a little bit more space for the return.
Or a gadget play.
Yeah. So they're going to get the ball. And as soon as they catch it, they're going to have a good amount of space and their blocking is going to be set up already. It's a lot harder to block a guy that's coming, full speed at you. And it's a lot easier. So it's going to cut down on injuries, but also make the play more exciting, which the previous rules have made it basically like a nightmare, where this team's like when the Chiefs are up on somebody and there's like 3 seconds left, you just want them to kick it out of the back of the end zone. You don't even want them to have a chance to return it. And it's very easy to do that now because they moved the ball up. So what's your take? Are you excited about this rule, or do you think it's no good?
I think it's going to be amazing. My issue with it is they need to make it easier to explain, because that was like you explaining the plot of Tenet or something.
And I'm reading directly from the website.
It was just crazy. I know you were doing a good job with that and trying to interpret it for the audience, but it's a little convoluted. But the XFL, if you go watch those old clips of a similar hybrid kickoff, very exciting. We got to the point where out of the 3 main outcomes for kickoffs last year, one is a ceremonial kind of nothing happens, or it's a bad outcome for the offense, right? Yeah. It's either going to be a touchback or they're going to get pinned back inside somewhere. The second outcome is players get hurt. The third outcome, which almost never happened, was running back a kick. And it used to be part of the game. It used to be a very exciting part of the game. But now I think kickoffs have become the time for a piss break, to be completely honest. Yeah. And I think Dave Toub is probably the happiest man in America right now, because he really loves to be aggressive on punt returns, probably to a fault sometimes inside the 10 and 5. But I think he'll be cooking up some fun stuff there. And the Chiefs have now a couple of players, maybe 3 if you count Isaiah Pacheco, that are pretty intriguing back there. One of whom is new, one of whom looked like he was probably not going to be of use to the Chiefs anymore. So I'm excited about it. I think it adds. Last year also was one of the lowest scoring seasons in a long time. And I know there's some fans out there that are kind of like meat and potatoes, old school. What do they want? Do they want these guys to go back to wearing leather helmets and have games be 9-6 scores? I don't want that. I want some fireworks. I want these guys to stay healthy as well, because we just had way too many injuries last year. And I think the product depends on keeping these guys on the field.
Keeping them on the field and keeping the game with points and excitement. And kickoff and punt returns are some of the most exciting plays in football. They're also monumental shifts, right, in momentum, and it's so hard to score sometimes in the NFL, and all of a sudden you get the ball in the hands of a guy like Dante Hall or Devin Hester, and it's like, in the game against the Colts where nobody punted, the Chiefs playoff game, it looked like the Chiefs were going to fall out of that, and then Dante Hall had a huge return on a kickoff, and I think it was a kickoff, not a punt. And the Chiefs were right back in it, and it nearly saved their season. Of course, they couldn't ever get it. No, it was a kickoff because nobody punted in that game. I just said it.
Well, think about the Chiefs' two first Super Bowl runs with Mahomes. That Texans game, nobody really talks about this, but McCole Hardman was sort of the spark on a return. I think he returned it all the way back to the 40 or 30 for the Chiefs, getting things going offensively. And then, of course, Super Bowl 57, Kadarius Toney, one of the bigger momentum swings potentially in Super Bowl history. So,
yeah. And the Chiefs have been bringing the ball out on kickoffs, and usually it doesn't work out because they're fielding it in the back of the end zone when it doesn't go out, and they try to bring it out, and they end up not getting as far as they would have if they had just taken a knee. So I'm excited about this. Dave Toub is an excellent special teams coach. And so how do you attack this? And the Chiefs did something, and this is kind of what this episode is about. They signed a guy, a rugby player this week. I believe he played at Gloucester. His name is Louis Rees-Zammit. He's a 22-year-old rugby player. He ran a 4.40.
He was disappointed in that, by the way.
Yeah, so he was clocked. This guy's fast. He was clocked at 24 miles per hour playing rugby last season. So not a great 40, but his game speed. Now keep in mind, rugby, they're wearing like shorts. They're not wearing helmets and all that stuff, but still.
But frame of reference, Tyreek Hill, his fastest speed was in the 22 range last season.
Right.
Different sport, but that is still flying. I think Usain Bolt gets up to 27 miles per hour, 28, something like that. So this is absolutely flying.
Yeah, and look, like he was fast. He was that fast without pads and stuff on, but he still ran a 4.4 in the same situation that everybody else does at the combine, which is, they're not wearing helmets out there at the combine either when they run their 40-yard dash.
He's big too. He's like 6'3", 210.
Yeah, so he is projected to be like a running back wide receiver hybrid. So look, this guy's he's not a football player. Like he played rugby. It's similar but different. Learning a new sport isn't easy. Learning a new sport at the highest level in the world, also not easy. So do we expect this guy to come in this year and go out there and start running routes and catching the ball from Patrick Mahomes? Almost certainly not. In fact, if he makes the team, he may not run a route all season long. Maybe out of the backfield as a running back. Maybe he spreads out wide and takes a reverse. But what is fascinating about this move is it comes right on the heels. And a lot of teams were interested in this guy. I think the Browns were interested. The Broncos were interested. The Chiefs got him. This new kickoff rule, as you mentioned, could lead to a number of trick plays. Now, if you guys aren't big rugby fans, and I'm not, I don't watch rugby, but it's like football and soccer combined. They can put the ball down, they can kick it, they lateral it, they tackle, there are scrums. This guy he's really good rugby player, but he has a dream of playing in the NFL. You can read about him. There's an article on Arrowhead Addict elsewhere on the internet. But the big thing in rugby is they lateral the ball like crazy. Like that's their passing game. And they chuck it, right? Like it's a little bit like soccer sometimes, and like that they're in these lines, and these guys, this guy can chuck the ball like 20, 30 yards behind him, like without looking.
Without slowing down either.
And without slowing down. So when you have all this space, and that's the thing with the new kickoff rule, right? You're going to have all this space. And whereas before, like, the Chiefs stopped using Tyreek Hill on kickoff returns because they didn't want him to get hurt because he was too valuable. And they would only put him back there like in emergency situations. And they eventually stopped using him as a punt returner too, except in emergency situations. Because you don't want some guy flying down the field full speed and completely dismantling one of your star players. But now, they're not going to be moving that fast. They'll maybe a little bit faster than a typical run play. But the other thing is you're not going to have nobody's going to be putting defensive linemen out there for kick returns in this situation. You're not going to have to worry about punishment from a 300-pound guy. It's going to be linebacker, safety, corner types, right?
Yeah, maybe some edges, yeah.
So it's a little bit safer. So if you wanted to use Isaiah Pacheco, or you wanted to use Hollywood Brown or Kadarius Toney in these situations, you're not as concerned about like, we're going to lose this guy on on one of these kickoffs. But with this guy, who I guess we'll start calling, because it will be easier, we're going to call him LRZ. Is that what we're going to do?
Yeah, people call him LRZ. People call him Reese Lightning too.
So that's good. That's good. What's your take on this, man? Like, do you think this is just, look, we see this every once in a while, right? Like some European basketball player gets signed to play tight end or something, and they're very athletic, and everybody's like really excited about them in the summer, and like they never amount to anything because it's the NFL. Do you think anything comes of this? And how excited are you to see this new rule with a player with this skill set?
Well, I'm cautiously optimistic. So he comes through the International Player Pathway Program, which produced, I'm going to say, stud left tackle for the Eagles, Jordan Mailata from Australia. So there have been hits, big hits from this program, not very many, but that is one recent big hit. And this new developing pipeline just hasn't been going for very long. And then you throw in the Chiefs and Andy Reid and Dave Tobe and Andy Heck, who's basically the run game coordinator. And if anyone can figure out how to use LRZ, it's these guys. He reminds me in a way, frame wise and athleticism wise. And when you're talking about running back, wide receiver hybrid who returns kicks, Cordero Patterson, who you'll notice the second this was announced, the Pittsburgh Steelers were like, oh, we got to sign this guy. That happened immediately. So guys like this who are big, have good vision, can one cut and house it, they're going to be at a premium suddenly. This rule is just going to be crazy because I think you could see guys like Saquon Barkley and Christian McCaffrey returning kicks. I think Tyreek Hill. I mean, if you can have two guys back there, think about Mike McDaniel down there in Miami with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill back there, or Devon Achane. I mean, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
So it's going to be really fun. I wouldn't count this kid out, but we shouldn't get too far over our skis. I'm kind of feeling like this is this year's Justin Ross, the recipient of the annual Bobby Scipio Training Camp Hero Award, right?
Yeah. Good old Bobby Scipio. I mean, it's such an interesting skill set. And I think the thing that I'm excited about, and I hope that this comes to fruition, is that like the NFL is kind of stuffy. It's slow to change. For years we heard, oh, the spread offense will never work in the NFL. It can't work in the NFL. They're too athletic, and running quarterbacks can't win in the NFL. Like all of these things. And it takes a while for the NFL to change. This new kickoff, I just think, and we saw these lateral plays when they do happen in the NFL are so unbelievably exciting. The Chiefs had 2 lateral plays last year. One won them a game on a turnover.
Should have, yeah.
And the other one should have won them a game as well. No, I'm talking about there was the pitch back on the turnover. I forget which game it was earlier in the season. And then of course there was the Kelsey play. And like, it's such a fun and exciting thing if you can execute it, but teams are just so petrified that if they make a mistake, that's it. It's going the other way. And I don't, that's a fair thing to be concerned about. But I think there are times where you can set them up and not be too concerned. And I think this new kickoff rule maybe opens the door for some more trickery. Like, look at the play that the 49ers ran in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs. That was terrific. And they executed it so well. And look, it almost didn't work. The Chiefs actually played it pretty well. They stayed disciplined. They were over there. They just the 49ers executed a little bit better. But who threw it? What was that player's name? He almost won the MVP for San Francisco. Jennings?
Jawan Jennings. Yeah, I'm picturing the red hair, the Rodman hair.
Yeah. So like he stood there with the ball forever and he waited and waited and waited. And then he sent it across the field, and he didn't give away what he was going to do. And I just thought it was so well done, so well executed. Frustrating as a Chiefs fan to give up a score on that, but it was really exciting football. And I'd love to see more plays like this, and see more plays like the Travis Kelce lateral. And maybe this starts to open the door for, hey, like we can innovate. And the Chiefs could be on the forefront with a guy who is really skilled at this. And he can work with the other guys on some of the lateral skills in practice. I'm fascinated. He could be a secret weapon for the Chiefs. And wouldn't it be the most Chiefs things ever to be 1 year ahead of everybody else? New kickoff rule. Nobody kind of knows. And the Chiefs are like, no, we have a plan for this. We knew this might be coming. And like, they might already have plays drawn up.
Yeah, I think jumping on this now and being an early adopter of the lateral, we saw the Detroit Lions, one of the most aggressive teams in the league in a lot of ways. They ran a hook and ladder in a high leverage situation in an important game, and it worked. If you have players who are intuitive and improvisational, like Travis Kelce, this can be a big advantage. But sometimes these NFL coaches are just petrified that, and really part of it stems from the fact that the media, you have these like Phil Simmses and Boomer Esiasons that are kind of curmudgeons. Anytime anybody tries anything new and it backfires, they harp on that over and over and over again. So yeah, I mean, I get why they're a little scared to do something crazy, because it can cost them their job. I think Brandon Staley actually developed paralysis by analysis because people were so hard on his fourth down decisions that I think he kind of like lost himself as a game day executive.
I agree with that. Actually, he was very aggressive his first year. And the same thing kind of happened to Todd Haley. Remember, Todd Haley the Chiefs were just garbage, but he was kind of trying to do that. And when they don't work, like everybody loses their mind. Even if it's the right call, everybody loses their mind. I think just the threat of lateral, like it doesn't exist in today's NFL. And so,
but if Kelce does it, they're freezing. He's done it enough where I think you have to treat it credibly, right?
Right.
Maybe the only player.
And I've seen him fake it once or twice, fake a lateral. And
is he faking, or is that him saying, I better not do this?
Yeah, he could be changing his mind, but you're right. It's going to freeze the defense for a second. So I think it's fascinating. I'm excited. I don't think that this guy's going to come in and light the world on fire, but at the same time, there's this weird, it's new. And if the Chiefs have some interesting things drawn up, they could take advantage of it early before everybody figures out like what all the tricks are. And I think that this is it's like a more multifaceted football play, whereas a lot of special teams plays, the rules are so rigid. There's only so much you can do. It's like when you're trying to block a kick or block a punt, there's only so much you can do. And like Belichick did that thing where he'd have the guy that was out wide run in at the last second and try to block the kick. That was brilliant. But like, it's one of those plays where you once you do it and you put it on tape, it's really hard. Teams are going to be ready for it. And a lot of those plays only work because of surprise. With this play, it's kind of interesting to me because it's almost like a running play. And so you have Andy Reid. It's like we're talking about Dave Toub because it's special teams. But also now you get to tap into the genius of Andy Reid, whereas like, what's Andy going to draw up for some kick returns? Like there's not a whole lot you can do. But for this play, you could have you could have the kicking team guys like turn around and just run backwards or swing to another side of the field. And if you've got two returners back there like that, I mean, you've got to cover the whole field. There's a lot of really interesting things that these guys are going to cook up that I'm sure I'm not going to think of, but it's going to be a blast to watch.
Reverse your heart out, jet sweep city. I think it's right up Andy Reid's alley.
Yeah. And it's going to open up to like teams always try to stay in their lanes. But if it opens up more laterals, it's just going to open up even more space for potential returns. And if you go on Twitter or YouTube, you can find a bunch of clips of XFL teams like running these plays. And very often they're like a shoestring tackle away from taking it to the house. So it's going to be absolutely fascinating. I'm excited. I don't expect, LRZ, this is a guy who could end up on the practice squad. You know what I mean? Like
he could end up back in rugby,
Yeah. But if he's good at returning and he's good and he can be a punt returner and they can use him as like a gadget running back guy, he'd have a shot to maybe make the back of that roster if he's as dynamic as playing with our football as he is with the rugby.
Well, you saw at the end of last season, they didn't know who to trust on those gadget end around plays because McColl just wasn't getting it done. Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore weren't playing. So in the Super Bowl, they were using Rashee Rice, who is a very bursty player, but I don't know that those kind of reverses are exactly in his wheelhouse.
Yeah.
And you don't want Rashee Rice getting hurt on a play like that. So in comes LRZ, and maybe he can take some of those.
An offensive specialist would be quite interesting. By the way, out in the chat, SA Flip says, speaking of rule changes, the ban on the hip drop tackle, I have a feeling there will be plentiful flags and disagreement calls on the hip drop tackle this coming season. What do you think about that, Adam? Was this a good rule for safety reasons or a bad rule because it's going to be a shit show to officiate?
Well, everything's kind of a shit show to officiate.
That's fair.
Yeah. And we had too many flags last season, but that tackle on Mark Andrews, these kind of tackles injure players at a very high clip. So I applaud them trying. And fans always say, oh my God, it's becoming flag football. That happened when they introduced the targeting rule. I'm sure it probably happened. I don't remember exactly, but I don't think we had social media like it was now. But when they introduced the horse collar, I mean, how many times do horse collar calls get made and you're like, oh, they got that wrong?
Yeah.
Maybe like 3 times across the league during a whole season. So I think we're probably overreacting right now, and guys will figure it out. You know, when the league basically looked at the way New England Patriots defenders were mugging Colts receivers back during the Peyton Manning and Tom Brady wars, it caused, I know there was a lot of fuss over, oh my God, you can't touch receivers anymore. It made corners and safeties better because they actually had to develop skills instead of just grabbing people.
Yeah.
So some of these things might make people better tacklers, sometimes it causes innovation. And I think this tackling is sort of new too. I feel like it's risen in popularity, right? The hip drop, the swivel, or whatever we're calling it.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's so hard to bring these guys down, and they're so big and they're so strong and they're so balanced. If you're trying to tackle one of these guys from behind, you can't grab them by the nameplate. And going low, yeah, I mean, you can go for the ankles, but these guys are so strong that, like, I mean, how many times have you seen guys, they get them, they get their ankle and they just run right through it. They've got a full head of steam. So it is going to make it hard. I'm not sure how you tackle. I pretty much, they can only go low, or they have to stay upright and catch all the way up to like escort them to the ground. It's going to be, I think
you just got to drive your hips through. Man, I really feel for players because I played for a little while in both high school and college and had multiple surgeries because of it. And I think if you haven't ever been hurt because of football, it's sort of hard for you to weigh in. The people I would actually look to is not current players. It's guys whose bodies are banged up down the line. Because if you ask players right now, they're in their earning window. They think they're in their 20s. They think they're indestructible, but they're not. You know, the game catches up to almost everybody. You want to keep these guys safe. You want to take care of them long term. I'm just never going to begrudge the NFL for prioritizing player safety. However, if for them to do this and not do anything about the fields, to me, it feels like the owners are saying, this is the thing we can do without spending. And the other thing we'd have to spend on, to have new fields. So we're not going to do that because we want to keep as much money as we can. So
it's a little hypocritical. Like and the one thing I'll say, just to your point about driving through, the only problem with that is that the hip drop tackle is like, you got to get like that play where Mark Andrews got hurt. He was heading into the end zone. And so you don't want to tackle a guy into the first down marker, into the end zone. And so that's when they're doing that, is when they're trying to keep him from going forward. But I think it's hypocritical of the NFL because like they're like, we're going to ban the hip drop tackle because it's dangerous. But then we're going to have Wednesday, Christmas Day games. And if it's for more money and more profit, extra games where the players don't want to do that, they don't like it, the NFL is all for it. I think it's the hip drop tackle. Like who's that disproportionately impacting? Nobody's hip drop tackling Creed Humphrey, right? It's ball carriers, it's stars, it's quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, guys the NFL want on the field, fantasy football, scoring points. So if you're a fantasy guy, yeah, this is great. You want to keep your guys on the field, but it's, sometimes it's the guys that are taking the most punishment, the linemen playing those extra games, playing 60 snaps. You don't see too many rule changes for them, and it's
they're bigger and their collisions are more like, think about a safety. Think about safeties running 15 yards nonstop and just car crashes over and over again.
Yeah.
So I know some Chiefs fans probably don't like this now, but if Travis Kelce, knock on wood, if something happened to a guy like that, we would definitely want the hip drop rule,
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see how it goes. Real quick, I want to talk to you about the Sneed trade and get your thoughts on there. I did a show over the weekend talking about my thoughts on it. I know a lot of people were upset with the return. They thought the Chiefs should have gotten more. I'll give you my take really quick in case you didn't see it. My take was Chiefs did fine here with the trade compensation because, in my opinion, that's what the market was for Sneed based on the contract he was going to get and the capital that was being asked for him. This was probably the best the Chiefs could have done. So I didn't have an issue with that. Now, I think if you do have an argument if you think the Chiefs should have kept him on the team and just had him play on the franchise tag to win another Super Bowl, or should have extended him. When you're comparing those two options to what they got for him, I don't love it either. I think I would have rather just kept him on the team this year. But if they were going to move him, if they have other things to do, guys to extend, the market was what the market was. If Brett Veach could have gotten a second round pick for him, you don't think he would have taken that deal? Nobody was willing to give up the second and pay the contract that Sneed wanted. And Brett Veach couldn't do anything about those two things. But what's your take?
Well, it's complicated because I do think they telegraphed that he was not going to be a Chief. Reports are that at the combine in Indianapolis, they were basically hinting that he's not going to be back. And when you look at their track record with defensive backs and giving them extensions, new contracts, they don't do it. Honey Badger, Marcus Peters, Kendall Fuller, Travarius Ward, Juan Thornhill, not as good as the other guys, but still a continuation of that trend. They just don't do it. And I think they don't do it for good reason, because it is sort of their special sauce. They are better at finding, drafting, developing defensive back talent and keeping it cheap than really any other team in the league. And when you're trying to afford one of the highest paid offensive players in the league and one of the highest paid defensive players in the league, and you have an offensive line that kind of gets expensive at times, you have to save somewhere. And I think they've decided we can save at defensive back and still be elite in the secondary. And that gives them a huge competitive advantage. But when other teams know that that's their philosophy, and they also know that Clark Hunt paid Chris Jones, he's probably not going to shell out another $20 million for L'Jarius Sneed. That's just not how the Chiefs do things. They don't, as much as we'd like them to go all in for the three-peat, even with NFL history on the line, that's not how they do business. They're thinking in 3, 5, 10-year increments, not just all in this year. So yeah, it was tough. It's tough. I think the rest of the league knew he was gone. And then with the Lions, you had that Carlton Davis trade from the Bucs. And they were one of the teams that I think was very interested in Sneed, but they probably heard the contract Sneed wanted and said, this guy's not as good as L'Jarius Sneed, but maybe he's a little healthier. Maybe he doesn't have the knee. Maybe he's not going to cost $20 million a year.
Right.
So their market kind of shriveled up. The Vikings didn't bring back Kirk Cousins. All of a sudden, they're probably not a contender this year, so they're not going to do anything. And it just seemed like they're playing musical chairs, cornerback musical chairs. And at the end, it was just the Titans who were really interested, and they had all the leverage.
They did. And look, I think if the Titans had a 3rd round pick this year, they would have given the Chiefs a 3rd round pick this year, but they didn't have it. And I can't stress enough that the Sneed contract demands, teams just don't want to give up a premium pick and a crap ton of money to get a guy like Sneed, who, look, has been very good for the Chiefs, but he has not been what he was last year his entire time with the Chiefs. And there's an argument to be made that he'll never be that good again. There's a high variance in that particular position. I'm not saying he won't be a successful player next year, but that may be the best season he has in his career, which around that age is when people enter their prime. He's comfortable in the system, catches lightning in a bottle, and oh yeah, it's a contract year, right? Not making, not as many business decisions. He was
Steve Spagnuolo,
Right. He's got Steve Spagnuolo. Also, he's got Trent McDuffie. Like, having Trent McDuffie over there certainly helps things out. So
Chris Jones being one of the best pass rushers in the league certainly doesn't hurt, right?
Right. I'm not trying to take anything away from L'Jarius Sneed. I'm happy for him. I'm glad he got paid. He earned it. He helped this team win 2 Super Bowls. Like, chief for life in my mind. But people that are mad at Brett Veach because the fans, us, we determined that his value was a 2nd round pick. The market, like, if there was any 2nd round pick out there, Veach might have taken it. Veach might have taken a 2028 2nd round pick if it was offered. It just wasn't there. I think he knew that they needed to move off them of Sneed. They've got players they need to extend, other things they need to do. They couldn't tie money up in both Chris Jones and Sneed. And I think once they signed Chris Jones, that was it. That was it for Sneed. And fine. It might mean that they can extend a couple guys next year, keep the offensive line intact, keep Creed Humphrey or Nick Bolton. There's a lot that they can do. So we'll see how it all plays out in the end. But at this point, I can think critically, but I'm not doubting this front office too much because they keep winning Super Bowls. So,
just 2 quick thoughts here. The first is there is a locker room component to this because this is not just some normal player they're jettisoning. It is a guy who has been kind of a linchpin of this defense, won 2 Super Bowls, went to another, just is beloved in the locker room. You heard Andy Reid at the owners meeting just gush about he's one of the best corners in the league, but he's an even better person. So I think they did probably shoot themselves in the foot a tiny bit, trying to do right by Sneed and kind of showcase that for the rest of the roster. The other thing is if you're picking between Chris Jones and you're picking him or L'Jarius Sneed, cornerback is one of the most volatile positions in the league. They're really good at finding corners. They're not as good at finding defensive linemen. Chris Jones is kind of a unicorn anyways. You're not going to find 70% of Chris Jones. I think you can find 70% of L'Jarius Sneed in the draft. Maybe not right away, but eventually. So I think they made the right choice, and the choice that kind of, we've never seen this defense in the Spags era without Chris Jones. And I don't want to see it without Chris Jones.
And Chris Jones is a future Hall of Famer. L'Jarius Sneed, probably not. And he can impact the pass rush. The fact of the matter is, it's just so much more valuable. L'Jarius Sneed can guard one guy on any given play. He could do his job every snap, and the Chiefs could get torched. Chris Jones can impact the entire play. He can break a play from his spot on the field. He's just way, way more valuable, even though he's aging. I was originally in the maybe we should keep Sneed camp because he's younger, but the more I thought about it, and after watching Chris Jones for another year, even if he falls off a little bit with age, as long as they can manage his workload and he's able to dig deep in the playoffs in key moments, that's it, man. Right up the middle. Bats down the pass, forces an early throw, sends you to the Super Bowl.
Do they beat Buffalo or San Francisco without him stepping up and making those plays late? I don't know.
No. I mean, I'm telling you, these Super Bowls, yes, obviously, Mahomes, right? Tyreek Hill, like these guys mattered, Kelsey. But on the defensive side of the ball, without some of the plays from Chris Jones, without some of the plays from Frank Clark, it just doesn't happen. And yes, I know like L'Jarius Sneed made a season-altering play in Baltimore. That was amazing. But you know who else made a very similar play a couple years before in a Super Bowl run? Dan Sorensen at the goal line versus Cleveland. Mahomes is hurt. Incredible play by Sneed. But lots of guys can make that play. And the Chiefs are good at bringing in guys who can step up. Mike Edwards. I mean, we see it all the time. Drew Tranquil. So they'll be okay. It's an ensemble, and I think they made the right call. All right, I wanted to ask you about 4 former Chiefs who are still out of work, and I wanted to ask you, when are they going to get a job? Who's going to get a job first, and will any of them be back on the Chiefs? So that's McCole Hardman, Donovan Smith, your favorite player in Chiefs history, MVS, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Which of those guys gets a job first, and will it be with the Chiefs?
On MVS, I get in trouble sometimes because I am very critical of highly paid players who don't live up to their contract. I don't hate players. I hate contracts. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You want me to rank these guys?
Don't hate the player, hate the contract.
In likelihood of coming back to the Chiefs?
Yeah, and who's going to get picked up first? And will it be with the Chiefs?
Oh, I think Donovan Smith is probably going to get picked up first, and it will probably be with the Chiefs. If you look at these other guys that are available, David Bakhtiari, DJ Humphries, Charles Leno, and who's the other guy? Mekhi Becton. They all have giant health red flags. Some of them might retire. Why not just go with the guy who played most of last season? You know, you'll have continuity in the offensive line. He's familiar to the locker room. And if you bring him back, I think a guy who's already with the team, who likes it in Kansas City, has won a championship there, it might be easier to draft a guy and replace him in the starting lineup, or replace him with Wanye Morris if he's ahead of schedule and flourishes. So I think that's the guy. I just don't expect MVS to be back. He would probably be 4th. Some team is probably going to pay him more than he's worth, just thinking that maybe he'll recapture the magic and give them that kind of deep speed threat. Maybe he ends up with his old friend Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers likes to get the band back together with receivers. Think about Randall Cobb and God, who's the other guy that they signed to that massive contract in
New York?
Yeah,
Lazard.
Alan Lazard. Yep. So he's probably 4th. CEH, the Chiefs seem to like him as a person and a backup. I don't think it's impossible. The problem with the running back market this year is almost all those guys were immediately off the board. And when the Chiefs weren't interested in Aaron Jones, it was just kind of like, okay, they are at the point where they're not going to believe in spending on this position. So maybe he's back. I think McCole Hardman fits better in Kansas City than anywhere else. So unless someone throws him an offer that he really likes, I think he's going to be keen on coming back. The question is, Hollywood Brown, LRZ, how much do these new guys threaten McCole Hardman's place in the wide receiver hierarchy? But he'd still probably be the second most likely to come back. But yeah, I don't know that any of these guys are going to get a job tomorrow. What do you think? You kind of on the same page?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. I think there's a lot of guys like McCole Hardman out there, kind of like fast but underwhelming receivers. Teams are going to see red flags about what happened with the Jets, like, them not working out there, and, him going back to Kansas City. Like, yeah, he made a couple plays, but maybe teams just think this guy's he's never going to really pan out. MVS, I'm not sure, man, if he's going to get a job. He really looked like he was toast last year. I don't know exactly what happened. He looked like he still had his speed. So I don't get it. But obviously the drops, majorly concerning. He was never that great to begin with. So it's hard given that he's getting up there in age and the season he had last year was so disastrous. I think CEH will get picked up. He's an adequate replacement level back. And if some team is looking for a little bit of veteran depth, he's not going to be expensive. So, and he's still pretty young. So
he pass protects. He sticks his nose in there.
Yeah, he ran hard for the Chiefs last year. I mean, when he got the opportunity, he could have sulked about his situation, and when he got the opportunity, he went in there. He ran hard. He looked like he put on a little bit of weight, and we'll see. But he's a good like Damian Williams type, like backup running back, who will probably hang around for a little while as long as he's still got legs.
Is he going to end up in Cincinnati with his old friends Joe and Jamar?
Possibly. We'll trade.
Chiefs fans would hate that, wouldn't they?
Yeah. I mean, we could pick him back up and trade him for T. Higgins. I would be okay with that. Not going to happen though. And Donovan Smith, tackles are always a premium. If his medicals are okay, I could see it being very similar to last year. Like all of these guys are probably post-draft signings. Nobody's in a rush to get them right now. They know they're out there. They want to see what they get in the draft, and then they will. But as far as somebody coming back for the Chiefs, I'd say most likely is Donovan Smith. And that'll tell you a little bit about how they feel about Wanya Morris as they head into the season and what they do in the draft. If they're going to try to get a tackle in the first round, maybe Donovan doesn't come back because they'll feel comfortable with a highly drafted rookie and Wanya Morris there and Juwan Taylor. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting. Bumpa, thank you for the super chat, man. When's the Sneed trade official so we can get the cap? That's a good question. I by now I would think it would be done, right? I haven't checked the transaction wire since this happened. He's got to pass a physical, and then that's that.
Yeah,
so,
I thought it was official, but
yeah, it's usually, it's pending physical. So if anybody has seen, if any of you guys are like super nerds and you check the transaction wire to see exactly when these things go through, let us know out there. But pending a physical, I would reckon it would go through right away. I don't think there are any date restrictions on that. Okay. We're coming up on the hour mark, so we're going to have to get out of here. Just really quickly, Adam, we talked about left tackle, and maybe the Chiefs go left tackle in the first round. And a lot of people think because of the retention of Chris Jones, the Chiefs really can kind of go whichever way they want in the draft. They don't have, and because they got Hollywood Brown, like they don't have to get a first round receiver. They don't have to necessarily get a first round tackle, although I think they should consider it. What do you think their strategy should be heading into this first round of this draft? What position groups do you think are at the top of their list to target?
Well, I know Chiefs fans are really fired up about getting a receiver, but I actually think our receiver room, I said this yesterday, is in better shape than our offensive tackle group. I just think there's no comparison. We've seen more from Rashee Rice than Wanya Morris. We've seen more from Hollywood Brown than Juwan Taylor. It's a little closer, but I think we probably feel better about that wide receiver group than we do the tackles. Also, the hit rate in round 2 is almost as good as round 1. And my personal opinion is the gap between wide receiver 4 in this group, whether it's Brian Thomas or whoever you think, and wide receiver 15 is not that big. So last year we had a lot of hits with wide receivers out of the first round. Rashee Rice was one of them, Jaden Reed, Tank Dell, Puka Nacua. So I would wait on receiver. And if you like a guy in the 40s or 50s, you can trade up again, but I would wait. I think this is a very good offensive tackle class. And if you can get someone at 32 who is a future starter but might not be ready right away, you can figure it out. You pick that guy. If someone falls at a position like corner and you think he has an actual first round grade, I mean, these teams usually don't think 32 guys have a first round grade. It's more like 20. Yeah. So I just think they're going to be looking at kind of best player available and kind of they're probably going to monitor trading up, trading back. I think they're really flexible. I think they'd be more flexible if they had Donovan Smith. I mean, part of it too is you don't want to tip their hand. What I'm curious about and wanted to ask you real quick is, at this point, how open are most teams to trading with the Chiefs?
That's a good point. We know they tried to trade it. They were interested in trading up into the 20s last year and couldn't get it done
with Dallas, right?
I think they were calling a couple of teams, but nobody wanted to dance with them. And It makes sense, right? I mean, look, all of their draft assets are at the back of every round. So it's not like they have got a ton of great ammo. And they have reached Patriots level saturation. The rest of the league is like, we can't help these guys. Like, if they've got a weakness at left tackle, we cannot allow them to move up into the 20s to get a left tackle. We're never going to win anything. Now, you might luck out with an NFC team who's looking at it and they're like, look, we'll worry about the Chiefs if we get to the Super Bowl, right? But like, it does make it harder to make the moves that the Chiefs want to make. I know fans, we sit here and we're like, well, they should have moved up. Why didn't they move up and get a receiver? And it's like, they can't, they can't steal draft picks from other teams. They have to have a transaction. If no one's willing to dance, they just got to figure it out. And
it would have been a bad move last year.
Yeah.
Rashee Rice ended up being better than Quentin Johnston, even though he was picked around later. So,
and I know much has been made, obviously, of how things worked out with the wide receivers last year. And I would say that two things happened that the Chiefs didn't expect. And that's on them. They didn't expect MVS to fall off a cliff. They probably thought they were going to get another 600-700 yard season from MVS and that he would catch the freaking ball. And they probably did not think that Sky Moore would not only not progress, but would regress from a year ago. So
and then you have Tony too, where they were talking Tony, about right? like, so a number one, right?
Like if you allow yourself to go back in time and think about the wide receiver room, we were all pretty excited. We were like, okay, Tony with a full training camp. He's so dynamic and athletic. Sky Moore, and after another year, is going to take a step forward. MVS, we're not going to have to worry. We know what he is. He's going to be the same thing. And then they take Rashee Rice. So you're like, they're loaded. They felt like they were pretty, I want to say like loaded, but they were loaded up on plenty of options where if like one of those guys, Tony doesn't work out, Sky Moore is there for you. MVS is there for you. Rashee Rice develops. But what happened was that a bunch of those guys just fell apart. And then it took some of the season for Rashee Rice to get to the point where he could help make the offense passable. So, I think they would be foolish this year to think, well, we got Rashee Rice and now we've got Hollywood Brown and everything's fine now. I think they need more depth there. Hollywood Brown should be good in this offense, but what if he's not? What if he doesn't work out? They thought Tony was going to be a number one receiver. So we're trusting their evaluation of wide receivers. It doesn't always work out. It's great that it did with Rice, but I think you have to come out of this draft with a first or second round wide receiver that's good, that's going to be able to make an impact for you at some point this season, just in case the worst happens again, because the Chiefs managed to make it work last year. I mean, you never can count this team out, but it's if they want to win that third Super Bowl, injuries happen. What if Hollywood Brown has an Aaron Rodgers? First game, third snap, blows out his Achilles. Like, then what do? You've got to have backups on backups on backups when it comes to the offense so that Patrick Mahomes has the weapons he needs to move this offense.
Yeah, there's a history with Hollywood of foot stuff. And I'm sure that the training staff and the Chiefs looked into that. But I think the Chiefs should keep doing what they're doing and more bites at the apple, kind of taking a second or third round wide receiver in perpetuity. Just keep doing it. Just reload. And if you have to let him walk, we've got Rashee Rice for 4 years and we're going to draft 3 guys behind him. And by the time he's ready to go, the clip will be reloaded.
Yeah. Just like with cornerback. By the way, you said that Hollywood Brown has a history of feet stuff. So does Rex Ryan. History of feet stuff. Do you remember that?
So does Tarantino if we're doing movie stuff.
That video, which look, I don't have any problem with it. A man loves his wife, right? But just that video, that was a time in the internet. I guess we're still in that time, but that was a time in the internet where like people loved nothing more than like being mean spirited and tearing people down and like, oh, that had to have been so embarrassing. If you're younger and you don't know what I'm talking about, Google Rex Ryan. All right, before we get out of here, let's talk a little film cinema. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you for your support. If you want to become part of the Arrowhead Addict community, check out the link in the description. Join the private Discord. We'll be in there watching the draft. getting fantasy football leagues rolling. We got a March Madness tournament going, which I am already busted out of. So check it out. It's a great way to support the show. Tom Hanks movies. I'm a big Hanks guy. Love his work. I'm still waiting for him to win that next Best Actor Oscar. But what are your 3 top Tom Hanks movies? And you can do this however you want. Like, you can do it based on how good you think the movie is, or you can do it based on how good you think Hanks is in the role. However you want to do it is fine with me. But what are your top 3?
It's a combination of those things, his performance and just how great the movie is. I love Tom Hanks. He's like the modern day Jimmy Stewart. I mean, everyone likes Tom Hanks, I think. For me, 3 is going to be Big, just because I grew up on it. It's a classic. It's aged pretty well. I think it's spawned sort of a new genre of like wish fulfillment movies. Number 2, a personal favorite of mine that I've seen a ton is Catch Me If You Can. I think that's just one that the watchability is off the charts on that one. For me, my favorite, this is kind of cheating maybe, but it's maybe my favorite animated movies of all time. It's probably in my top 50, if not top 25 favorite movies. And that's Toy Story 3, which I just think is beyond phenomenal. And I didn't know an animated movie could have me like literally scared, like grabbing stuff because I'm so tense the first time I watched it. But huge fan of Toy Story 3. So those are my top 3. What about you?
All really good choices. I love Big. As an actor, I think too, he has some moments in Big. I know it's largely a comedy. He has some incredible moments in Big where you could really see how great of it, because he started out and he was in Splash and The Money Pit. Like, he was doing comedies. And he has some moments in Big, some acting with his eyes in particular, because he's playing a child, that I think is really impressive as an actor. And you see what sort of the future, would mean for him. But I don't have Big on my list. Look, that's so hard. Number 3, I think I've got to go Castaway. It's not my favorite film, although I think it's quite good. It's just it's like a magnum opus for him as an actor. I mean, you could say the same thing maybe about Forrest Gump, but he's a little limited there. I just think Castaway from an acting perspective is so fantastic. It's an incredibly difficult task that he has in that film. And I mean, how many movies have you sat there and sobbed at a guy in a volleyball? Like, I mean, he's unbelievable in that film. And that's where I'm going to go with my second film for him, is, again, because I was an actor and I really appreciate brilliant performances. Philadelphia. He's got a moment in Philadelphia where
talk about sobbing, a tearjerker. God, man, that movie.
When he goes to see Denzel Washington for the first time and Denzel Washington turns him away, he walks outside, and credit to the director for this. It's just a shot of him, and he walks out onto the street and he's just looking around. And if you appreciate good acting, it's so unbelievable, because there's no dialogue, nothing is said, but what is communicated, what Tom Hanks communicates, is just utter helplessness of his situation. And he sort of looks around the street and it's like, there's nobody to help me. Like, where do I go? What do I do? And I think we've all felt that way at one point or another in our lives for any number of situations where, like, you're at the absolute bottom, you're in despair, and you feel like there's nobody to help you and nobody coming to save you. And he does that without uttering a line. And I really appreciate that. And I think the movie's fantastic. I'm a big Denzel Washington fan. So if you've never seen Philadelphia, check it out. It's not a feel-good movie. I guess maybe in some ways it is, but like, it's not something you want to put on a Saturday night when you're, trying to shake off the rust from the week.
No, man, that Neil Young song will haunt you.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. Denzel in the 30s and 40s, good luck finding a more charismatic thespian than that dude during that era.
And look, there's so many other good ones here that I'm not going to mention. Forrest Gump, A League of Their Own, absolutely fantastic. He's hilarious in that movie. He's so good. Iconic lines he delivers. I'm actually a really big fan of a more obscure movie of his that's like 4 hours long called Cloud Atlas. Came out in 2012. If you've never seen Cloud Atlas, great ensemble piece. That's really an interesting film. But for number one, for me, I think my favorite Tom Hanks movie is The Green Mile. I think that movie is like everything that I love about movies. I like a little bit of horror. I like a little bit of science fiction. I like a little bit of drama. I like a little bit of comedy. And that movie just has all of those things in spades. I think his performance it's a great ensemble cast as well. Michael Clark Duncan and
the late great, right?
Yeah, terrific actor. And some other actors in there as well that are just absolutely unbelievable. But Tom Hanks has a really difficult job in that movie as an actor as well. And I think he's incredible. So, I mean, God, Saving Private Ryan. There's just so many good movies.
I can't believe that didn't make either list. We're probably going to take some heat for that, but I need to revisit The Green Mile because it's Frank Darabont coming off of Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah.
So kind of the same guy who did that, adapting another Stephen King piece of literature, right? I never read The Green Mile, but I think
short story.
It's a good match. Like this guy adapting Stephen King short stories, and you almost wish he did more of them.
Yeah, and Darabont, look, Shawshank Redemption should have won the Oscar. I like Forrest Gump. It's a great epic. It's
Forrest Gump at best should have been third that year.
Right. What else was out that year?
Pulp Fiction.
Yeah. And Forrest Gump was great, but the Shawshank Redemption is every single second of that film is incredibly watchable. There is not a boring moment in that film. I think it's up there. I think it's like a perfect movie. There are a few movies that I have in the perfect category, including Cool Hand Luke and Die Hard. I think Die Hard's a perfect film. I think it's the perfect action film. And every action film that you see after Die Hard is trying to be as good as Die Hard, but they never get it right. I think Shawshank Redemption is absolutely incredible.
Man, perfect is hard. That's like Chinatown for me.
Chinatown.
Frank Darabont also made The Mist, which is another Stephen King.
Yes.
An interesting thing about that movie, there is a black and white cut. For some reason, the movie becomes way less cheesy, feels way more Twilight Zone-y.
That's how it was originally meant to be shot, was in black and white.
Yeah, I would highly recommend that version over the kind of the one that got released.
The monsters in the colorized version don't look right because they intended to shoot it in black and white. And there's a great theater here in Chicago called the Music Box, which is like an indie theater. They do great. They do film festivals, horror festivals. It's featured, by the way, if you're a oh God, what's the John Cusack movie? A High Fidelity fan.
Who's not?
Yeah, he goes, the movie theater they go to is the Music Box, and you see the brilliant marquee when they walk out. And they showed Hateful Eight and the way it was intended to be shot. They put in a special screen for it. So I've lost. Why did I start talking about the Music Box?
I don't know. You're talking about black and white cuts.
The Mist, right? Yes, I saw The Mist. The Mist showed the Music Box showed The Mist in the full black and white, the way it was originally intended to be seen. And if you like that movie, it's incredible. It's fantastic. All right, should we start a movie podcast, by the way?
Yeah, maybe, because now you got me thinking about other movies that have alternate black and white cuts. I'm thinking about Logan, the Wolverine movie, which if you haven't seen that black and white cut, it's very cool. But yeah, maybe every once in a while we should just do a little side movie project for the Arrowhead Addict audience if
Yeah, let us
People
know.
are interested, right?
Let us know in the chat if you'd like a movie spinoff podcast. That'd be a lot of fun. We're both big fans. So, all right, we gotta get out of here. We went long as we always do. That's what happens when you get two old pals together. Thank you everybody for your support. Look, we'll be around this weekend. If Chiefs do anything exciting again, we'll try to hop on for you. But it might be time to cool our jets for a little while until the draft. We'll be back next week with our regular slate of shows starting on Tuesday. Again, if you want to become a member of the Arrowhead Addict podcast, check out the link in the description. Special thanks to Adam Best for joining me today. Special thanks to producer Richard for always making the show work, and to all of our members. We'll see you guys next week. But until then, as always, go Chiefs.